Order. The first item on the agenda is the election of a chairman. I must ask for nominations for the position of chairman.
Proposed, Joe. Will you second that?
Are there any other nominations? As there are no other nominations, I call on Deputy Joe Costello to take the chair.
Hey.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for electing me to serve as chairman of the committee. I'm certainly looking forward to working with all of you in the coming days, weeks, months and years, and congratulations on all of you on your appointment to this particular committee. And in the first instance, I'd like to recognise the valuable work that has been done by my predecessor in this chair, Bernard Durkin, who is, I'm delighted, is on the committee, and his vice chair, Timmy Dooley, who is also on the committee, and to recognise the work that has been carried out by the committee in the previous 4.5 years or thereabouts. It certainly was very considerable, and I served on that committee, and I'm glad to have had the opportunity of experiencing the workings and the excellent efforts that were made on that particular committee. Can I say that at the present time I believe that the European Union is playing an important role in Irish parliamentary affairs, that role is increasing on a very regular basis, and that at this point in time that approximately half the legislation that we deal with domestically here emanates from Europe. In that context, and in the context of the Lisbon Treaty, which has conferred greater powers both in terms of supervision and in terms of accountability and in terms of framing legislation, greater inputs from European parliaments in relation to a whole range of measures in holding the European Commission and the European institutions accountable, as well as the domestic parliament accountable, that this particular committee has a wider remit than previous committees had, and I expect that we would exercise that remit to the maximum, and that we would carry out our business fully. In the past, to a considerable degree, ministers did not come into this chamber. Indeed, most of the ministers did not appear before their sectoral committees. And I believe that at this point in time, a greater degree of accountability is required. And it is the function of committees to hold the government accountable in relation to matters in-house, and particularly in relation to matters in Europe. And this will be a major function of this committee, and will be a major function of the other sectoral committees, because we operate under two remits, really. We operate under the remit of the terms of reference that we have received from the Dáil in the motion that was passed, and also in the context of the programme for government. And that programme for government makes it quite clear that the work of this committee will now be shared with the sectoral committees. And that each sectoral committee will be responsible for examining and scrutinising matters that come from the European Union. That will be an important role for them to do, and that we will do that in consultation with them, in coordination, and ensuring that matters European are properly scrutinised at all levels, but particularly that this burden of work is now shared across the entire sectoral divide. There are, as we all know, many important issues and challenges facing Ireland and Europe at the present time. So it is a critical time in the history of the European Union, and it is a very interesting time for a committee of this nature. Already today, the Taoiseach, the Minister for Finance, is abroad in Brussels, dealing with very important economic issues, and all of these matters will, in one way or another, come before us in the weeks and months to come. Another area that I would have some interest in and concern, and matter that was discussed to a very considerable degree under the previous committee, as Deputy Durkin knows very well and was very much involved in, is what was thrown up by the Lisbon Treaty referendum, that it showed that there was a high degree of a disconnectedness, you might say, between the citizenry of this country and what was happening in the European Union. And we have been not as good as we could in communicating Europe to the citizens of this country in the past. And there is a role for this committee to ensure that we engage, insofar as possible, the public in our deliberations, so that when we are discussing matters of importance, major issues that are coming through from the work programme of the European Union, from the Commission, major legislative proposals, that we open up lines, certainly of electronic communication with the public, and that we invite them to make their contributions on the debate. I think that's extremely important. And that secondly, we also engage in one of the recommendations that came out of the committee that was set up after the Lisbon Treaty, to look at how we might best maximise our role, our engagement between the citizenry and the European Union, that we would have an information centre here in Parliament, and that we would have in-house and outreach programmes, so that we would communicate not just what happens in this Parliament, but also what happens in the European Parliament, and the importance of that Parliament to the decisions that are made here. As I said, approximately 50% of legislation that is passed in this Parliament emanates from Europe. So we cannot any longer not give it due consideration and due deliberation, and we cannot do that properly unless we do engage the Irish public as fully as possible in the matter. I expect to outline at a later stage how we will conduct our business from now on in, what sort of work programme we will have. But I want to once again to thank you all for electing me to this position at this particular important time in European affairs, and I consider it an honour. I consider this an extremely important committee, an extremely influential committee, and I am sure that we will all be able to work together in the best interests of the country and ensure that our business is done with that particular view in mind and coming from that particular position. So once again, I want to thank you for electing me to the chair, and at this point in time I will, with your agreement, move on to the next business of the House.